Welcome to Çanakkale! So this is Çanakkale, which is situated at a strategic and historically important place, the shortest crossing point of the Dardanelles, and only about 200 miles from Istanbul. And it's for many years been a short stay destination for thousands of tourists who come here to pay respects and to see memorials of the thousands of men who lost their lives at the Gallipoli campaign in the First World War. Dominated by its castle and its ferry boat port, it has much more to offer than a one-night stopover on a tour bus. The promenade is a social centre for the 500,000 people who live here, and it's been an important trade centre for thousands of years, linking Europe and Asia. So let's have a quick look around this important city. The promenade is busy all day long, and especially in the evenings, as people of all ages come out to enjoy the cafes and restaurants. There are lots of young people here due to the big universities, which have large campuses, and this certainly adds to the lovely atmosphere of the place. And most people only see the promenade, but there are lots of streets, shopping streets, going off from the promenade, and with cafes and restaurants, really lovely. You'll find the usual street vendors here, and of course all the franchise shops you normally find in a city. And the people here are very friendly. And their pets.
Beni de çekiyorlar bak.
And she's even got a tattoo of her dog on her arm. Maybe due to the universities, the people here are very cosmopolitan. You having fun?
Go, Benetton.
Yeah. You need a little dog.
I can put the dog in here. What a great idea.
One speciality of Çanakkale is helva, and they do lots of different types here, and this is one of the main streets that sells it. So let's go and try some. The basic ingredients of helva is tahin, which is sesame oil, and sugar. So this is helva, the speciality of Çanakkale. Kaç çeşitler var?
Çok çeşit var.
Kaç tane?
8, 9.
Öyle mi?
Evet.
Ay ne güzel ya.
Damak zevkinize göre hepsini yaparız.
Tamam.
Özel sipariş.
Deneyeyim. But here the speciality is adding cheese, which gives it a moist and less sweet flavour. A little away from the promenade in the centre of the city is a covered market. This is really a big market. I think I've lost Trudie. There's also an old market here called Aynalı Çarşı, but we found it was more for tourists.
Dardanelles abisi fırından çaksın 10 numara abi. Evet abi, hangi televizyonu çekiyorsun bizi baba? Garanti ver.
The further down you come, you realise there's so much more to this market.
As the sun sets here, everyone comes out for a walkabout, and the cafes and restaurants quickly fill up. The prices here are a bit more reasonable than most resorts, and strangely enough, waffles are very popular here.
Evet, orası Orası. Evet, hoş geldiniz, buyurun. Evet, öğrenciye büyük kampanya.
There are lots of hotels near to the ferryboat port, and most of them have got restaurants underneath, and they're nice restaurants too. There's certainly plenty of choice when it comes to food, and there's no shortage of places you can get an alcoholic drink either. There's a few interesting old buildings, notably the clock tower is probably the most impressive, which was built in 1897 by a wealthy Italian trader. Probably the oldest building is the castle, of course, which is now the Naval Museum, and we'll have a look at that a little later. And most of the nightlife here in Çanakkale revolves around the clock tower and the promenade. And we found one thing in Çanakkale is the fish is really good. Recommended. So I've got the hamsi tava. What have you got?
I've got sea bream, which is chupra.
Your favourite. So this is hamsi, which is like whitebait hamsi. And you can eat it whole actually, hamsi, but they do usually take the heads off. There are two parks in Çanakkale. One is about a mile out of the town to the north. But the other one is a much more established park called the Halk Bahçesi, which is right in the centre of the town and very popular with the youngsters. Since September of 2004, there has been a new attraction in the centre of Çanakkale.
So this is the huge wooden horse they used in the film Troy. And after they finished filming, they donated it, and it's here for you to see in Çanakkale Square.
The Trudie heykeli, or Trojan horse statue, is the actual horse that they used in the Troy film of 2004, which starred Brad Pitt, Sean Bean and Peter O'Toole.
And this is probably as close to Brad Pitt as I'll ever get.
It was donated by Warner Brothers after the film was completed in 2004. But it's actually made of fiberglass and weighs over 12 tonne. And I've got to say, it's much more impressive than the one that's actually at Troy. And it's ironic that most of the film was actually done in Malta, not in Turkey. The film and the horse have boosted visitors to this area, and of course to the ancient ruins of Troy, which are only 20 miles away from the city. So this was the mock-up of the original Trojan horse. To be honest, it was quite a sad looking mock-up, and they're redoing it. I hope they make it better than it was before. And there's some pieces of it. I don't know really why they don't bring the one from Çanakkale, the one they used in the film, because that's a much more impressive horse. We'll be looking at the ancient ruins here in Troy and its fabulous museum a bit later in the video. Most people who visit Çanakkale, whether on an organised tour or not, come to pay respects to the soldiers who lost their lives in the Gallipoli campaign of the First World War. There are 31 war graves and memorials dedicated to the British Commonwealth soldiers and 50 to the Ottoman Turks who died here. And almost all these graves are on the European side of the Dardanelles Straits. The first memorial we wanted to visit is the one dedicated to the Turkish Ottoman men who lost their lives in the war. And the quickest way for us was to go to Gallipoli on the ferry. It's about £5 to go with your car one way and about £3 for the return. And the system is computerised, so you don't get a return ticket, but they know if you're coming back the same day. And you can get a fresh simit as well. 10 lira, mind you. Of course, you have to make sure you booked on the right ferry boat. Although the ports on the other side are not very far apart anyway. You can take the ferry to Eceabat or to Gallipoli. Gallipoli is the shortest route. Well, we're on board.
On board?
Yeah,
It's
a ferry boat. I've got to admit, it's very well organised and it doesn't take long. And this ferry boat's going quite often.
The whole trip takes about 10 minutes, so we've got to go. So we need to get back in the car. Come on, Mick.
I didn't even have time to go to the toilet.
And we're going to go left.
We're going left, are we?
Well, that's what you said.
Well,
We're
I'm
going
not
left.
quite sure where we're going to go.
Sound very healthy.
I'm not quite sure where we're going to go from here.
Okay. Well, I was going to say
Computer says
follow that car.
left. So this is the Çanakkale Şehitler Abidesi, which is basically a memorial to 250,000 Turkish soldiers who lost their lives. There are graveyards all over this area, which is now a national park, and we're going to go and have a look at a few of them now. There are absolutely thousands of names all round this memorial, and if you're interested in any family history of family persons that were lost in the war, the British War Graves Commission have all these names on a register, and I think it might even be on the internet now. So sad. Thousands of names. On the 25th of April 1915, the New Zealand and Australian armies landed on this cove, which is now called Anzac Cove. This is a very moving plaque that Ataturk wrote in 1934 to the people who lost their lives here, to the foreigners who lost their lives here. And in fact, the first time I read this, it made me well up, and it still does today when I start reading it.
Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country. Therefore, rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets to us, where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well.
They sent their youngsters off to war and never saw them again. And of course, most of the families haven't even had the chance to come here to see where they died.
This beach became the main base for the Australian and New Zealand troops for the 8 months of the Gallipoli campaign. The British generals and commanders, including some influence from Winston Churchill, thought it would be easy to take the Dardanelles and eventually Constantinople, now Istanbul, which would take the Ottomans out of the war. But they hadn't considered the strength of the Ottoman army headed by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, or the logistics of such a campaign. Through continued arrogance of the commanders, this entire mission was a bloodbath and achieved nothing except a huge loss of life. Any tour of this area will probably include this castle, which is opposite Çanakkale on the European side.
So we've got here at just after 5 o'clock, unfortunately, to this Kilitbahir castle. It's closed because winter time here starts on the 1st of October and the last entry is 4:15. I thought it was still summertime, look at me.
But we did find the bunkers interesting.
I think they're all connected under the ground. I think there's tunnels to each one of these. They would have stored all their ammunition and supplies in here for the guns, which of course were the protection over the Dardanelles to stop any ships coming through.
Right here is where the cannons would have been bolted, and just over that wall is the Sea of the Dardanelles. But I actually am too short.
And the Sehit Onbaşı monument to those who lost their lives loading the guns. Corporal Sehit actually survived and saved the day. But for me, the most interesting war museum is this one, the Çimenlik Kalesi, or the Lawn Castle, which is the main castle in Çanakkale.
So we're at the Deniz Müzesi, which is what we would call the Naval Museum, if you like. 200 lira each to get in, which is about £6 each. But I've also had to pay 120 lira to bring my camera in, which is a bit unusual.
Unusual maybe, but it was certainly worth it. Some of the artifacts they have here are really interesting, and I've not seen objects like this in any other museum.
This is one of the sea mines they would have used to try and destroy our British battleships entering the Dardanelles. I hope they've deactivated it.
Well, don't hit the prongs on the top.
There's a sign that says no smoking.
Particularly fascinating was the wreck of a submarine.
As you can see, it was quite crudely made. And I suppose that would have been full of some sort of explosives.
The central part of the castle houses lots of other artifacts and also some old video footage and an explanation of what actually happened in the war. town of Gallipoli, or Gallipoli as the Turks call it, which the war campaign was named from, is on the European side and a little east of Çanakkale.
There's two ways to get over to Gallipoli. There's the new bridge or the ferry.
So behind me is the 1915 Çanakkale Bridge, which is 2,023 metres long. It's the longest suspension bridge in the world. It took 5 years to build it, and it's part of the new motorway system joining up Asia and Europe. Before this bridge, the Akashi Kaiko Bridge in Japan was the longest, but this actually spans an extra 32 metres, beating the world record.
It's 330 metres high, that's 1,096 feet. And it was designed by Turkish and South Korean companies at a cost of $2.7 billion.
205 lira. 205. Kredi kartı alıyorsunuz değil mi? Temassız? Oy ne güzel.
The centre of Gallipoli town is dominated by the ferry boat port and fishing boats. It can be very busy with lorries sometimes when the ferries come in, but the more you walk about, the more interesting this lovely little town becomes.
So Gallipoli is a very typical Turkish town, but there is one speciality here that they do, which we're looking for, which is fish soup. But we can't find it anywhere, and all the restaurants have told us that they only serve it in the winter time. So we found this lovely little restaurant anyway, and we've had some lovely food instead. How is it, Louis?
Very nice.
And on one side of Gallipoli they've got a beach, and it's quite a nice beach. It's probably full in the middle of the summertime. And it's right next to the Hilton Hotel.
It was a bit windy that day, and of course this was the beginning of October. So let's have a look at what else Çanakkale's got to offer.
I was intrigued to know what was being sold in this shop, and apparently everything is handmade by the women of Çanakkale. Some lovely things in here.
They've got a stadium, a culture centre and a huge mosque which is fairly new.
Most people don't see this, but there's a river going right through Çanakkale. It's really lovely, and it's got all boats on. If you cross over the river, you're going into Kepez. Quite a busy place, and there's lots of shops and restaurants there too. So as you can see, Çanakkale's got some huge shopping centres, and this is one of them. Oh, and I've just found Trudie, and what's Trudie doing?
I'm shopping for baby clothes.
It looks like you've got an armful already. And it was good that we came in here, because Vatana is a great computer shop. Got myself a new mouse because I dropped mine and broke it.
Get yourself a snack or even a full meal. There are some great restaurants in some of these places. About 20 miles from Çanakkale is one of the most popular and famous ancient ruins.
This is Troy, which was in a very famous Greek story in Greek mythology, which a lot of scholars believe could actually be true. It was basically a love story about Helen, the wife of a Greek king, being abducted by Paris of Troy, although she actually loved Paris of Troy. And this started the Trojan War around the 12th century BC, in which of course the wooden horse was given as a present, and the soldiers hiding inside opened the gates to the city of Troy and let the Greeks in to ransack the city and kill everybody, apart from the women apparently. One important fact is this site is a few kilometres from the coast, but the sea used to be right up here where this flat plain is. You can actually see the sea in the distance. So Troy was actually next to the sea. As you walk around the site, you'll see that the ruins are from different periods in time, dating back to the 12th century BC, right up until the Romans. Whether the story is true or not, this place is well worth a visit, and the ruins are not spectacular, but the museum certainly is. This museum's got probably the best collection of gold jewellery, fine glassware and pottery that I've seen in any museum in Turkey.
And with all the museums in Turkey, there's always one piece that stands out. It's not very clear, but there's actually 4 levels to this museum. Yeah. But there is a lift you can use.
They normally have a mock wooden horse here, but it was being renovated. In fact, when I looked at what they were doing, it looked more like it was being remade.
Pert springs to mind.
So what about places to stay? Well, there are some lovely hotels in and around the city, as you've seen from the video. But
we stayed at this hotel. This is the Troia Tucson Hotel, which is about 10 miles out of Çanakkale.
it's in a small resort called Gallipoli, which in October was very quiet and mostly closed up.
We had a chance to relax a little bit around the pool.
The hotel had good facilities, nice restaurant area and lovely staff. It's got a spa and a pub.
The original owner was British and she insisted on having a British pub.
And there's also a quiet lounge area, which is mostly opened up in the winter, I think. The rooms could do with a bit of an upgrade, but they were clean and had air conditioning.
And just below the hotel, it's got its own little private beach. which is fine sand. It's a bit pebbly to walk into, and at this time of the year, which is the 1st of October, the water is pretty cold.
And there's a beach bar here too. There's also loads of parking and it's open all year round.
So what's the best way of getting here? Well, you could come on an organised tour, of course, or you can come on the national buses from Istanbul, Izmir or Bursa. The autogar, that's the bus station, is a few miles out of the city of Çanakkale, so you'd have to get a dolmuş or a taxi from there, but they're cheap enough. But the best way to come is probably by car. So we drove up to Çanakkale from Fethiye, which is about 400 miles, and it took us 8.5 hours with a couple of stops. And there are toll roads as well, which are not expensive. We hired this car from a company called Pegasus in Fethiye, and it cost us £300 for 2 weeks, which we didn't think was too bad. You can also hire a car from the airport, because you can actually fly in to Çanakkale. There's an airport there, and you can fly in from Istanbul and hire a car when you get there. So that's it from here in Çanakkale.
Don't forget to like
Subscribe.
and hit the notification bell so you don't miss where we go next.
Thanks for watching.